What did the Buddha teach about your higher self? The answer, I promise, is not what you think. Part 1. In the modern spiritual landscape, the idea of a higher self is a beautiful and compelling one. It's the notion that within each of us, beneath the surface of our everyday personality, with all its flaws and fears, there exists a more authentic, wiser, and more divine version of ourselves. It's our inner guru, our true north, our connection to the universe. We are told that our spiritual work is to quiet the noisy ego so we can hear its subtle guidance, to align with its frequency, and to become one with this perfect inner being. This idea is deeply comforting. It gives us a sense of purpose and a belief in our own inherent goodness. But it can also create a subtle struggle. We can feel frustrated when we can't hear its voice, or feel like a failure for not living up to this perfect ideal. We can turn the spiritual path into yet another project of self-improvement, another mountain to climb. But what if the entire mountain is an illusion? What if the Buddhist teachings point to a path that is even more radical, more direct, and ultimately more liberating? A path that isn't about finding a better self, but about seeing through the illusions of self altogether. In this series, we will explore the surprising and profound Buddhist perspective that challenges the very idea of a higher self, and in its place, offers something even more wondrous. To understand the Buddhist view, we first have to examine the very concept of a self. The core revolutionary teaching of the Buddha, which sets it apart from many other spiritual traditions, is the doctrine of anatta, or not self. This teaching suggests that when we look deeply into our own experience, we cannot find any solid, separate, permanent thing that we can call a self. What we find instead is a dynamic, ever-changing process, a collection of 5 elements: our body, our feelings, our perceptions, our mental habits, and our consciousness. From this perspective, the problem with the higher self concept is that it is still a concept of self. It's a subtle and highly refined form of what Buddhism calls clinging, upadana. We are still creating and attaching to an ideal, a concept of me. We've just swapped out the flawed everyday ego for a shiny spiritual one. A powerful metaphor is to imagine being in a prison cell. The everyday ego is an ugly, uncomfortable cell. The spiritual path, as many see it, is about renovating that cell, painting the walls, getting better furniture, adding a nice view. This is the higher self project, creating a beautiful, comfortable prison cell. The Buddha's path is not about redecorating the cell. It's about realizing the door has been unlocked the entire time. From this foundation, we can deduce why the concept of a higher self, while well-intentioned, can become another spiritual trap. First, it creates a fundamental duality. It splits us in two. There is the lower me, the everyday person who is struggling, and the higher me, the perfect, wise being. This division inherently creates conflict and a sense of inadequacy. We are always striving to get from here to there, from a state of imperfection to a state of perfection, a struggle that can be endless and exhausting. Second, it is still a project of the ego. The desire to become or unite with a perfect, powerful, all-knowing higher self is a very subtle and sophisticated form of self-centeredness. It's still about my spiritual attainment, my connection to the divine. the focus remains on the self, albeit a glorified one. The Buddha taught that the ultimate source of our suffering is the very idea that there is a separate self to begin with. Therefore, any path that has as its goal the perfection or discovery of any kind of self, no matter how elevated, is ultimately a path that will not lead to complete liberation. The goal is not to improve the self, but to be free from the burden of selfhood altogether. So, what does this mean for you, especially if the idea of a higher self has been a meaningful part of your journey? It doesn't mean you must discard your experiences of intuition, wisdom, or profound connection. It simply invites a new way to interpret them. This leads us to our first practice, the practice of depersonalizing wisdom. The next time you have a moment of profound insight, a flash of intuition, or a feeling of deep peace, resist the urge to immediately label it. That was my higher self speaking to me. Instead, try a different label. Simply and gently note, clarity is present, or wisdom is arising, or there is a feeling of peace here. Can you see the subtle but powerful shift? You are moving from a language of ownership, my higher self, to a language of observation. You are seeing these positive qualities not as the property of a special entity called a self, but as inherent qualities of the mind that can be accessed when the conditions are right. You are not connecting to a thing. You are experiencing a state. This simple shift begins to unlock the prison door. In summary, we have challenged a beloved spiritual concept. We've seen that from a Buddhist perspective, the idea of a higher self can subtly reinforce the very illusion of a separate self that is the root of our suffering. It creates duality, can be a sophisticated form of ego, and keeps us focused on improving a conceptual self rather than realizing a deeper freedom. This might leave us with a sense of emptiness. If there is no higher self to strive for, what is our potential? What is the goal? The Buddhist tradition answers this not with a better self, but with a boundless potential that is already within us, waiting to be uncovered. This potential is known as Buddha nature, and exploring the profound difference between a higher self and our own innate Buddha nature is where our journey will take us next. What are your thoughts on this critique of the higher self concept? Does it resonate or does it feel challenging? Share your perspective in the comments below. If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, please like this video and subscribe to Buddhism Wisdom, Spirituality. Part 2. In our last part, we took a courageous step, questioning the popular spiritual concept of a higher self. We saw how, from a Buddhist perspective, any idea of a fixed, permanent self, even a perfect one, can be a subtle trap that keeps us in a state of striving and duality. This deconstruction can leave us in a vulnerable place asking, if I'm not trying to connect with my higher self, then what is my ultimate potential? What is the goal of the spiritual path? The answer offered by the Mahayana Buddhist tradition is one of the most beautiful and empowering concepts in all of spirituality. It is the teaching on Buddha nature. So, what is Buddha nature? It is crucial to understand, first and foremost, what it is not. Buddha nature is not another word for a soul or a higher self. It is not an entity or a thing that you possess. Rather, Buddha nature, or Tathagatagarbha in Sanskrit, is the innate, fundamental potential for every single sentient being to awaken and become a Buddha. It is the inherent purity, clarity, and wisdom of the mind itself, which is temporarily obscured by the clouds of our confusion, greed, and aversion. The metaphors used to describe Buddha nature are beautiful and illuminating. It is like the vast, clear, open sky. Our thoughts, emotions, and ego identities are just temporary weather patterns, clouds, storms, sunshine that pass through the sky. The weather can be turbulent, but it never, ever stains or damages the fundamental nature of the sky itself. You are not the weather, you are the sky. Another classic metaphor is that of gold hidden within common ore. The gold is already there in its entirety, perfect and complete. It's just covered by the dirt and rock of our conditioned habits and delusions. The spiritual path is not about creating the gold. It is simply the process of clearing away the ore so the gold that was always there can be revealed. Now we can see the profound and liberating difference between the concept of a higher self and the reality of Buddha nature. A higher self is usually conceived of as a noun. It is an entity, a perfect version of you, a destination you must strive to reach, or a being you must learn to channel. The project is one of becoming, of achieving, of connecting with something up there or deep inside. Buddha nature, on the other hand, is more like a verb. It is a capacity, a potential, a way of being. It is not a destination to reach, but the very ground on which you are already standing. The work is not one of becoming someone better, but of unbecoming all the false layers of identity that are not you. You don't add anything to yourself to realize your Buddha nature. You simply let go of the clouds that are obscuring the sun that is already shining. This shift is the difference between a project of self-improvement and a path of self-discovery. The higher self model says, you are flawed, but you can become perfect. The Buddha nature model says, your essential nature is already perfect. You have just temporarily forgotten. A common misconception must be addressed here. Is Buddha nature just another word for God? Not in the traditional Western sense. It is not a creator being separate from us. It is the luminous, knowing quality of awareness itself. It is the capacity for consciousness to know itself. It is not a being, but the very potential of being. So, how does this shift from seeking a higher self to uncovering Buddha nature change our lives? It moves us from a state of striving to a state of trust. It allows us to relax and to have a much kinder relationship with ourselves. This leads us to a beautiful and simple practice, the practice of seeing the gold. This is an exercise in changing your perception, both of yourself and of others. When you interact with other people, especially those you find difficult, make an effort to look beyond their difficult personality, their anger, their fear. See if you can catch a glimpse of the gold within them. Can you sense their own innate wish to be happy and free from suffering? Can you recognize that their difficult behavior is just the outer shell covering a luminous, inherently good nature? And most importantly, do this for yourself. When you make a mistake or get caught in a negative emotion, it's very easy to just see the ore of your failure. The practice is to also remember the gold. Acknowledge the mistake, but also acknowledge the pure awareness that is able to see the mistake. That awareness itself is your Buddha nature. It is unstained by the mistake. You can say to yourself, the cloud of anger is here, but the sky is still the sky. As we have discovered, the Buddhist path offers a profound alternative to the search for a higher self. It replaces a goal of becoming a perfect entity with the reality of an innate potential to awaken our Buddha nature. This is not a thing we need to acquire, but a luminous clarity that is already our deepest essence, temporarily covered by the clouds of our conditioning. This is a path of subtraction, not addition. It is a journey of letting go of who we think we are in order to realize the boundless, peaceful awareness that we have always been. But what does a life lived from this realization actually look and feel like? What happens when the clouds part and the sun of Buddha nature begins to shine through more consistently? That is the final and most inspiring part of our journey. What is one cloud that you notice often obscures your own sky? Share your reflection in the comments below. If this idea of Buddha nature resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to Buddhism Wisdom, Spirituality. Part 3. Welcome back. In our journey so far, we have taken a courageous look at the popular concept of a higher self and seen its potential limitations through a Buddhist lens. Then, in Part 2, we replaced it with a more profound and liberating alternative. The idea of our own innate Buddha nature, the boundless potential for wisdom and compassion that is the very ground of our being. We've shifted our goal from becoming a better self to uncovering the radiant awareness that we already are. We now arrive at the final question. What does a life lived from this understanding actually look and feel like? What happens when we begin to trust our Buddha nature? When the clouds of our confusion, craving, and aversion begin to part, the natural light of our Buddha nature shines through. This light has two essential qualities, like the two wings of a bird that allow it to soar. These qualities are wisdom, prajna, and compassion, karuna. Wisdom, in this context, is not intellectual knowledge. It is the direct, intuitive seeing of reality as it is, impermanent, deeply interconnected, and empty of any solid separate self. It is the wisdom that understands that the wave is the ocean, that the cloud is the sky. Compassion is the heart's natural and spontaneous response to this wisdom. When you truly see that there is no fundamental separation between yourself and others, your heart naturally opens. The suffering of another is no longer their problem. It is felt as our shared experience. Compassion is not a sentimental pity. It is the active, courageous wish to alleviate the suffering of all beings, a wish that arises from a place of profound interconnectedness. This is where we see the most radical shift away from the higher self model. The project of connecting to a higher self is still, at its core, a personal project. Its driving question is, how can I become more aligned? How can I receive better guidance? How can I perfect myself? Living from the realization of Buddha nature naturally shifts the focus from a personal project to a universal one. The question is no longer, how can I perfect myself? But rather, how can I be of benefit to all? When you realize your true nature is the same boundless, open sky as everyone else's, the artificial border between your own happiness and the happiness of others begins to dissolve. The energy that was once consumed by the project of self-improvement is now liberated to flow outwards as compassionate action in the world. life becomes less about self-fulfillment and more about selfless service, which, paradoxically, is the source of the deepest fulfillment. This noble way of living is not some far-off goal. It is cultivated through simple, moment-to-moment practices that reorient our minds away from the self and towards this open, compassionate awareness. The first is a classic contemplative practice from the Zen tradition. It is the simple question, "Who am I?" Several times throughout your day, especially when you feel caught in a strong emotion or a rigid opinion, gently ask yourself this question. Who is the I that is feeling angry? Who is the I that is so sure it is right? Don't look for a verbal or intellectual answer. Let the question itself be a tool. Let it soften the edges of your solid sense of self. Let it point you back, again and again, to the silent, spacious awareness that is hearing the question, the awareness that is your true home. The second practice is to adopt a simplified version of the Bodhisattva vow. A Bodhisattva is an awakened being who, out of great compassion, postpones their own final nirvana to help all beings achieve enlightenment. We can adopt this spirit in a very simple way. Each morning, as you start your day, form a gentle intention in your mind. May my thoughts, my words, and my actions today, in some small way, contribute to the well-being and awakening of others. This simple dedication can transform your entire day. A difficult commute becomes a chance to practice patience for the sake of all who are stressed. A tedious meeting becomes an opportunity to listen with compassion. Your life is no longer just your life. It becomes your offering to the world. And so we complete our journey. We began by questioning the popular, yet potentially limiting idea of a higher self. We replaced it with the Buddha's more liberating vision of our own innate Buddha nature, not a perfect self to find, but an already present potential for wisdom and compassion to uncover. And finally, we have seen that living from this understanding naturally shifts our lives from a project of personal perfection to a path of universal love and service. The most profound secret of the spiritual path is this. It is not about becoming a better, shinier, higher version of yourself. It is about the profound relief, the deep exhale of realizing you don't have to be a self at all. Your true nature is not a beautiful statue you must painstakingly build, but the vast, open sky that was already there all along, waiting for you to simply look up and notice. What did you find most surprising about the difference between a higher self and Buddha nature? Please share your insights in the comments below. If this journey has helped to clear some clouds for you, please press the like button and subscribe to Buddhism Wisdom, Spirituality. Thank you for your practice. May you realize the boundless sky of your own true nature.